We're live now. Good evening, everyone. I am here for the 2018-19 Budget Forum for the Council Rock School District. I am Bob Reinhardt, the Director of Business Administration, and I will be presenting some information for you tonight. First of all, I'm going to go over the historic perspective. Actually, I'm going to be using 2010 through 2011 through 2018-19 preliminary budget. I'm going to do some budget comparisons, tax increase information, and then also I'm going to show you the retirement rate issue and what has caused our budget to go up so high or in that period of time. 2018-19 preliminary budget overview. I'm going to go over the revenues, appropriations, and I have some information in regard to that. I want to tell you at this point that the preliminary budget document is available on our website. It has a lot more detailed information about where we are. And I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go to our website and you can read a lot more about the district and you'll learn quite a bit of information. We'll then go into the 2018-19 adjustments to the preliminary budget. This evening, after this evening's budget forum, we will have a finance committee meeting to deliberate moving from the preliminary budget to the final budget. Anyone that has questions, this is the email that you can send to, and this comes to Dr. Frazier and myself, and hopefully we would get back to you in a timely manner with any answers to any questions that you may have. So you can definitely use that, budget@crsd.org. Okay, where we've been. Most people are aware that in 2011 and 12 and 2016-17, we had significant budget deficits. First time it was 14.2 million, and then 14 million we had. And in 11-12, we actually had to reduce staff by 65 full-time equivalents personnel, and you can see the distribution of that, administrative, professional, and support. And then again in 16-17, we had to reduce the staff by 14.14, and again you can see the distribution on that. So over these years, we have reduced staff by a total of 105.14. In addition to that, we were looking at having to reduce additional staff, but we were able to negotiate our contract with Aramark, who provides the custodial services for the district and cleaning services, and they reduced the contract by $468,000, which that would have been staff members if we were not able to renegotiate that. So we've been under some tough financial times, and our program has somewhat reflected that. I think we've been pretty good with maintaining the excellent program, but it is somewhat stressed. I want to point this out to you. The first column shows you the 2010-11 budget. If you look all the way down, you will see that in 2010-11 we had a $199 million budget. Preliminary budget for 2018-19 is all the way up to $240 million. It's a significant increase. I want to point a few things out to you. If you look over the 8 years that we went with the budgets, our salaries went up about $5.4 million or 5%. If you look at that on a annual basis, that's a increase of about 0.63% each of those years. Now, it's very simplistic to just look at that numbers. A lot of things have happened through that period of time that would equate to that number. That should not be something that you just equate to think that people got raises of 6.63%. There's reduction in staff and other type of things that have occurred through that. The other thing that I want to point out is our healthcare costs. Our healthcare costs are something that are going up each year, and $19 million in 10-11, $23.6 million in this year's budget, and that's an increase of $4.7 million or about 3.1% each year. I will tell you we had a couple difficult years during this stretch, but this year was a very good year. The last 2 years has been a good year for us, and in fact, our premiums will not be increasing this year, which is great. The retirement is the area that has been most publicized, and it should be. Our contributions went from $8.8 million to $37.4 million, or an increase of $28.6 million. You will see that that is a large portion of the $41 million that our budget has increased over 8 years. And the rate of increase is 327%, or about 40.93% on average. That has really brought the retirement rate from just above 5% in 2010-11 all the way up in this year it is 33.57%. That means that of covered payroll, for every dollar we now pay our employees, we must contribute 33.57 cents to the retirement system. Understand this has nothing to do with the level of, well, it has something to do with the level of benefits, but most of that payment is to pay the unfunded liability that has occurred in that plan that we have. The other thing I want to show you is there's 2 items here that we no longer have. One of them is athletic fund transfer, where we used to transfer $2 million to the athletic fund. Accounting standards changed, and we no longer have the athletic fund, and now the athletic fund is actually in these numbers. So something that was not in these numbers originally are actually part of the increases through the salary and benefits. The other thing is the budgetary reserve. In the past, in fact, in 2010-11, we had a $1 million budgetary reserve. That is money that is set aside in our budget for contingencies. If you don't use it, it increases your fund balance, and we'll talk about that a little more. As you see, we no longer have that, so it tightens our budget a little more. I will also tell you, in the past, we used to maintain 5 teachers on reserve for enrollments that are increasing over the summer after the budget's been passed. We no longer have that either. So those are 2 areas of the budget that have gotten very tight. And then you'll see the other appropriations, which that includes everything from I guess utilities, supply cost, and other items paid for throughout the district. And over time, that went up about 1.12%. Okay. This is a graph that I've put together just to show the impact of the retirement to the impact of the budget. So if you look at the yellow line, and you will see back in 2010-11, you will see that we actually reduced our budget that year by $1 million. And if you remember what I spoke about before, that year we cut 65 employees. It was necessary for us to actually cut the total amount of our budget to be able to afford what was going on at the time. It was why we were still recovering from the recession. I also want to show you what happened to the retirement, which is the blue line. As you see, for 2 years, or 3 years actually, the retirement outpaced what our budget was going up. And again, those were some very lean years. We are now, our budget is increasing a little quicker than the retirement is, but that shows quite a bit of what was going on and what has caused our increase to be so high. The other thing that I want to show you is that in relation to the budget increasing, caused mostly by the retirement rate, our real estate taxes in terms of dollars is increasing, but not at close to the pace of where those lines are, and that is somewhat concerning for us, and you will see that in our fund balance and where our fund balance has gone over these years. Also, if you start from the bottom, 2010-11, our tax rate in mills was 110.68. You'll see the tax increases as we go through, and you'll see some years that we've went 0%, 1.7, 1.3, 0.61, 0.25, and we also eliminated per capita, which is an elimination of about $450,000 worth of revenue. And then the following 2 years, we have gone up to 2.4 and 2.5. Fund balance trends, and I really want you to look at 2011. We started at $27.9 million. We've increased our our fund balance to 29.4, and you'll see the increases in that. But as you see, after we topped out in 2015 at 29.5 million, you will see the years that we have dropped. And that is beginning to be a concern, although 24 million seems like a large number. When you're looking at a $240 million budget, losing fund balance at that point with constraints because of the Act 1 index concerns me considerably. Okay, now we're going to get into this year's budget and the impacts in this year's budget. 2017-18, that's the budget we're in right now. And we have showing a deficit of $4.2 million. Preliminary budget that was approved in April is a deficit right now of $4.7 million. And you can see all the differences there. I am going to highlight some revenue areas that I'm going to recommend adjustments going from the preliminary budget to the final budget, and I'm going to try to explain all that and the rationale for that. And also we're going to have some showing how the administration right now is recommending to reduce our budget, to reduce the deficit to closer to 4.2 or 4 million or $4.2 million. Again, why we think that's acceptable, the 4.2 to 4.2 million dollars or something like that, is generally and historically we generally, and hopefully we continue, to actually have revenues come in above the budget by 1% or 1.5%. And if you multiply that out, 1.5% is $3 million or something like that. So that would create fund balance of about $3 million. We hope to do the same thing on the expenditure side. And again, that could increase our fund balance by another $3 million or so. So that's why we feel comfortable at 4.2. And I could talk about some other things in regard to that, but I think that's why we explained where we are, and I'm hopeful that that scenario continues. Selected revenues. The budget I have in front of the board right now assumes a tax increase of 2.4%. 2017-18 rate is 120.71. 2.4% would allow us to raise it by 2.897 mils to a final millage rate of 123.607. So that is really the explanation in regard to the millage rate. And I also want to talk about earnings on investments. We will be having a short presentation today at the Finance Committee meeting in regard to our investments. And as everyone is realizing, interest rates are starting to return to normal, as they would say, and the yield is increasing. We feel comfortable that after increasing our interest earnings from $500,000 to $1 million this year, we feel comfortable moving it up another $250,000 next year. And I will explain the rationale for why I am doing that. Earned income tax revenue increased significantly last year, and we're watching that this year. And although it's going down a little bit from last year, it doesn't seem like we're going to get quite as much. It does seem like we could increase that revenue a little bit. This is for the board's consideration and just some statistics for them should the board decide that we need to reduce the tax increase rate. And increase in mills, this is the percentage increase in the millage rate, and this is the revenue it generates from those mills. Should we reduce it from where I have it now at the $4.8 million, this is the expenditures or additional revenue we have to make up. So that's just a simple calculation from taking the 2.4% revenue, subtracting out what the new revenue would be, and that is what it gives it. And then the median homestead assessed value is a number that is generated by the county. And in Council Rock, our median homestead is 38,800. And you will see the tax increase associated with that based on the amount of taxes we are increasing. Now we're going back to the earned income tax, and I have a chart here just to show you where we are and the important numbers. I want to make sure you see that from 2012-13, the blue line is the total collections for the year, and it goes from 12-13 all the way through 17-18 and 18-19, which is our budget. The orange lines is showing you what was collected as of April 30th in each of those years. As you see, unlike real estate taxes, which we get a large collection at the beginning of the year, earned income taxes really don't get, most of our revenue doesn't come in until the last 4 or 5 months of the year. So this just shows you the statistics of where we were and where we are today. What I want to point out to you is that last year, as you can see, as of April 30th, our collections were a little higher than this year. And if you look at the year before, you can see how much higher we ended up generating in revenue than the previous year. That was about a 12% increase, and it was something that was unexpected to me to be so high. This year, I am now anticipating receiving about $17.8 million based on the receipts that we have so far. I will tell you, if you ask me the probability of that, I will tell you that my comfort level isn't high because there's very big variances with revenues that come in at the end of the year, but I'm pretty comfortable with that. If you come over to 18-19, you will see that the yellow line is where the budget is right now, which I increased it from $16.5 million to $17 million. The blue line that I'm showing here is what I am showing the board this evening at Finance to say that I think we can get another $350,000 out of that, and you'll understand where my numbers are coming from. But I will be recommending tonight to go up another $350,000. On the expenditure side, this is really just going over where the increases have been between last year and this year. And I have highlighted the debt service, and that's an area that I'm going to spend a little more time with because it's an area of my concern, and I will explain that in the next few minutes. Appropriation highlights, I will tell you that where the preliminary budget is increasing staff, I think it's by 15.1, but we're also reducing staff by 13 with the closing of Richboro Middle School. Now, please don't take that 13 as 13 professional staff members or teachers. It is throughout administration, support, and the professional staff that we are having that. So there's a net increase, I think, of about 2.1 staff members in this budget. Now we're going to talk about the debt service. In the original budget, the first draft of the budget, I showed an additional $600,000 in the budget. So that $17.9 million was actually $18,566,000. The reason I did that is because based on our borrowing, we need that to have the proper budget. The budget, of course, here is in blue. Our actual debt service is in orange. So with the increase in $600,000 in that budget area, we only have 1 year that we're have higher debt service than our budget, and therefore we're going to use fund balance for $356,000. Additionally, we are able to, should we need to borrow additional money, we have some leeway to be able to do that with the structure of our debt service. As that number showed you earlier, we removed the $600,000 from the budget, and it was because we just couldn't afford it at the time. And I am very concerned about that, because now, as you see this, the blue line is now overcome by the actual cost of our debt service until 2024, and we would be using $2.7 million. And I don't believe we want to go into the capital markets again until 2024, although we do have other capital projects that are in need at the district. Okay, I hope you understand that. And now what I'm doing is I'm taking the preliminary budget and listing adjustments from the preliminary budget to the final budget, and as we're moving forward. I have 3 things highlighted in red, and that is because there are changes that will be made in those items should we go from a 2.4% tax increase to a 1.9% tax increases, so those items will be affected. The big things that you'll see here is, as I talked before, earnings and investment, $250,000. I'm suggesting or recommending that we increase interest earnings for that amount. And earned income tax collections, I'm also saying we should increase that by $350,000. And guess what I have back down here? I have the increase into our debt service of $600,000, and that's why I am looking into that and wanting that move, because I think it's very, very important that we fund our debt service at this point. Additionally, you will see that many of the cabinet areas went through their budget areas, and we reduced areas of our budget. I will point out that there are some areas for curriculum coordinators that were cut by $227,000 that they're doing without items. And I also point out special education reduced their contracted services by $150,000, and also reduced their need for professional staff from 5.6 to 3. And I need to point that out, that Dr. Lambert believes that he is still going to be able to provide the services necessary, but he has looked at it differently and has tried to do without in some areas. The other area is, with these reductions, we've heard a lot of support for the elementary technology integration specialist, and we have now put them back in the budget because we've heard a lot about that, and I think it's a special program, and it is interesting for us to keep it in. Although, as you see this, we are recommending, should it go down below the 2.4, that we will be taking that out of the budget for the 1.9 would be the administration's recommendation. So if you look at this now, we started with a deficit of about $4.7 million. Our deficit now is down to $4,091,000. So we have great improvement in regard to it, should we go with the 2.4 mil increase. The other item is going down to 1.9. And if you see the highlighted area, that is the reduction of our property tax revenue. As you look back on the former page, you'll see that we would lose revenue of $568,000. You will see the other numbers here have changed greatly because we're changing items. And we've taken out the 2 elementary technology specialists. They're no longer on the list of putting back in. And we are also saying that we would delay textbook adoptions for $470,000. And at this point, that is where we would be if the 1.9. Of course, if there'd be the board looking at this and saying we want to go at the 1.9 and keep everything in as we had it before, we would just be increasing the use of fund balance by $758,000. This fund balance or deficit is about $4.2 million rather than the $4,091,000. But I think this is acceptable for where we are rather than putting additional smaller reductions in the expenditures. So that really explains the adjustments. My final notes show that we included two alternatives. It reestablished the $600,000. And if we go with the 2.4, the two professional support of the elementary technology integration specialists will be in there. And I didn't want to point out that Dr. Lambert has reduced his additional needed staff by 2.6 FTEs. He originally had 5.6. I will tell you the last time we reduced staffing, special ed took an especially hard hit in regard to that, and he is trying to build the staff again. I am finished with my presentation tonight, so if there's any questions, I'd be willing to take them now. Well, I don't care if you ask a question. If you ask a question, I'll answer it. No, I'm joking.
You know, I like to see the budget of what is not the program items that are going to be moved out that we have this year that we won't have next year. For instance, that girl program, grade that's funded by St. Mary's, is no longer funded. The two elementary tech people we have this year are not going to have next year. I like to see it in terms of what's the fun of the kids, what are the programs, you know, when you take money out of the textbooks, what areas they are. And when you told us the preliminary budget, you said you already cut technology before you even presented the preliminary budget. Well, what did you cut? Technology, not one person yet. I mean, I like to see it in terms of, you know, what it needs to invest.
The technology budget was cut, and that was cut because there's excesses in there that weren't needed, and that was an administrative decision. It wasn't anything that's going to affect anything that the public needs to know. It isn't something that we've taken something out that we needed, and we've decided we can't afford it. So it wasn't anything like that. The women's program, I think we will talk about that tonight at the Finance Committee meeting. That was not funded through our budget, so that is not in the budget. That was a St. Mary's funded program. So it isn't something that is affected by our budget. Now, if we want to support it, it would then be put into the budget, and that's where you'd see it coming into the budget. And the other issue that you asked about, the technology specialists are back in the budget, and you, yes. If we don't go with 2.4, we are going to need to reduce areas, and that's one area that wouldn't have the original budget, and we felt that was one of the areas that we could reduce. The other thing, the textbooks.
Why is it that you always have to look toward technology for reductions? And why doesn't Council Rock do a comparison of where our technology is with just the neighbors that touch us? Because I called them up, and we are so far behind in technology compared to just the neighbors who touch us, let alone the people out in the main line that are rated like first, second, third in the state. Did they have technology specialists at integration specialists and have to like 2 years on every level at Penn State? The Chamonix is giving out iPads to the kids in the middle school. We're just going through a 2-to-1 situation. And we won't even hit high school for like 2 more years. And it's Chromebooks.
I understand, Nancy. We can talk about that again in finance. The textbooks that we have taken out, there's a complete list that we're going to go over in detail at the Finance Committee tonight. So you will see what textbooks are affected by that. I understand your position with technology. I do.
Are you going to speak at the Finance Committee further about the 2.6 reflections are, what service were those persons providing that they, are they supervised, are they special ed supervisors?
No, they're not supervisors, they're actual instructional staff. Dr. Lambert sent a memo out about them, and I'd have to pull that memo out. I don't remember the information in that memo, but I think that described it quite a bit.
But it's in the classroom.
Yes. It's a reduction of additional staff. We're still, he's got, 3 more staff members are still coming on board.
I appreciate it. Still, my first concern was supervisory. Gone through some changes in that
Yes.
past year. That was not in favor. And the classroom, there's a variability that happens there every year anyhow, as we get the children in the classroom. So I hear you say it, and we'll be valuable as we are each year, to what the needs are of the IEPs.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, Nancy. And bye-bye.
When I die, I want to send you a funeral. Something really, really old, and we will.